okay? Oh, goodness. Susan, can you read it? Because I sound like I'm
Yes.
holding my nose.
The statement of announcement. A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the February 14, 2019 Policy Committee meeting was distributed February 11, 2019 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The Americans with Disabilities Act. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistants, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first we will to adopt the agenda. Do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
So
I'll
moved.
move to adopt.
A second.
Okay, thank you. And the first item on the agenda is the draft policy on governance. So this was part of the House Legislative Oversight Committee request that we put some things in place that addressed their concerns. And so does anybody have any changes to what I sent out? Do we need to discuss any of it?
Can you give me a little bit of background on kind of how this particular governance model was chosen and the significance of it?
I wasn't on the commission when the Carver model was chosen, but I think from what I've read about it, one model is not necessarily good for everybody, and sticking with one model entirely is not necessary. And I think that this Carver model wasn't exactly followed according to the Carver governance teachings. It was just decided by that group at that time that this is what we would do, and we would not get involved in basically in setting policy other than broad agency goals. And so there were 5 policies that the commission had input into, basically, and one of those is the governance policy itself. So this just kind of loosens that up and says that referring to the law. I don't know why Carver was chosen.
Vicki, I can give some history on it. It actually was adopted prior to my serving on the commission in May 2009. But what happened was, after the 2000 LAC audit, there was a work session that was held out at Embassy Suites here in Columbia. And at that time, Bobby Harrell was the chair. And I remember, because I was working in the Lieutenant Governor's Office on Aging, and a commissioner actually at lunchtime, it had been pouring down rain, came to my office and said, you need to get people there because you would not believe the commission is getting ready to repeal their policies and adopt this new Carver governance. And there was a lot of concern. There was dissension among the commission members about adoption of this model. But anyway, it was adopted. And as you said, there were 5. And John Vaughn was the one who really pushed for this. He was a commissioner at that time. And the way he explained it in one of the commission meetings, it was like a bowl within a bowl within a bowl. And you looked inside the bowl, but you did not put your hands inside of the bowl, is how he described it. In essence, it was a way in which he was describing for commissioners that they would have a responsibility of looking inside the agency, but not actually interfering in the day-to-day operations of the agency. And so that model was adopted. I will say this, though, I think that what has happened is that there was a very strict interpretation and maybe misinterpretation of the Carver governance, and that's the reason why there's been pushback over the years about that model. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that model. There are many models out there, but the problem has been, I think, has been this pushback that commissioners don't get involved in the day-to-day operations, don't provide some of the needed oversight. And I think that's one reason why there's been some concerns expressed about the Carver governance. But that gives you maybe a little bit of background of the history. Like I said, it happened prior to my coming on the commission, but I do recall all of that happening.
I was just going to say that's helpful, and I just wanted to understand, is the proposal that's in front of us now a move away from the Carver governance model, or is this just kind of a reframing of the language?
I think it's a reframing of the language, isn't it?
Well, I don't want us to be limited by saying, well, we voted on this Carver thing, and so, we have to not get involved in anything else, because the commission can get involved in anything it wants to get involved in, and should have in the past. And no, the day-to-day operations and procedures, no, but our job is to set policy, which is why I think we should have more than a means and an ends and an executive limitations policy. I think we should have whatever policies we feel are necessary to govern. It is a $700 million a year agency, and it's very complicated. And I just don't want any commission in the future to be limited by a process policy that was put in place. So basically what I have added in the highlighted one on the first page is that the commission, whoever that is, whenever, will debate and establish policies that create a governance model that promotes the commissioner's ability to govern, and that the governance model that is created will create a vision, assist in securing resources, and establish benchmarks for performance, and monitor them and be accountable to key stakeholders. So these behaviors that I have crossed out that somebody put in there, they kind of dictate commissioner behavior, but they don't really say what our goal with our governance process model is. And I think what I've highlighted there is what my vision is of what the commission's job is to do, and that we can choose from whatever we need to, but not be limited by anything.
Is that what you were just reading? It says the commissioner's ability. Is that a typo? Do you mean the commission's ability, or you mean the commissioner's? There's not one commissioner. Is that supposed to be S apostrophe? Or is that supposed to be?
Yeah, I thought it was a misplaced apostrophe myself.
Yeah.
Commissioners, yeah. Plural.
Plural. Okay.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So, it has been a source of contention in the past, because when we look at finance, when we look at a lot of things, you're not going to cover it all in that, in those 5 policies. And now we've moved away from that, and now at administrative directives, we're looking at standards, and we're looking at we're providing more oversight in the way we go about it. Some of the future changes might include doing away with some of the so many administrative directives and going more towards standards. But for now, we have input into whatever we think we need to have input into. But when the commission votes to do something and it doesn't get in the bylaws, or it doesn't get in a policy, then it kind of gets forgotten about. So the Senate oversight thing also mentioned Robert's Rules of Order. So I believe it did, and it said that this will be the way we'll transact business. This is on the second page.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third paragraph down, they had asked us to address how we would speak to the media. And And this would be that we would come up with, this just says that the chairperson, the state director, or other agreed-upon person designated by the commission will be represented by these people. And an individual commissioner may speak out in public, but they need to speak as a private citizen. Let it be known that I'm not representing the commission when I say this. I'm representing my personal view. And that's really all they ask us to do in the Senate Oversight Report. The next paragraph is, let me think why we had to put that in there. Request for information needed to come through the state director. Commission may ask staff presenters at commission meetings for additional information or clarification. And staff presentations, they wanted to, in other words, the Senate wanted us to address how the meetings were conducted, keeping in mind that this was done at a very tumultuous time in our history with, you know, people who are no longer on it that didn't follow Robert's Rules of Order, and who, from the chair, from the position of the chair, debated. So I think I've got in there that if the chairman commission somewhere in there, if they want to debate, they need to step down from the chair, because that's according to Robert's Rules of Order. Yeah, that's above. That's in that second, on the second page, on the second paragraph that's highlighted. What else did Oversight Committee want us to do? Oh, they wanted us to use commission meetings, you know, and I don't remember if this was in talking to Phil Willis or if it was written, but in the commission meetings, the commission needs time to debate and discuss and present their points of view, and not be like commissioners are attending a staff meeting, so that the whole meeting is taken up with staff presentations. So I put in there, staff presentation at commission meetings will not dominate and exceed time allowed to the commission for discussion and debate. Staff will not pursue legislative initiatives without the commission's input. That was a direct recommendation resulting from the Adult Health Care Consent Act mess. And so the last one was, subject to the supervision, direction, and control of the commission's state director shall administer the policies established by the commission. And that's just quoting state law. So there are several things in there that the Senate Oversight Committee wanted done, and I think this addresses and covers those. Mary, y'all as a staff have had time to look at these. Do you feel like we've covered everything?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you looking at it. And I was just sitting here writing down what we could do to make other folks more comfortable, since this is a draft policy, that I'd be more than happy to go back and look at the history of actually how governance has changed based on the different dates on the policies, and then give them also a column that says all the different items the Oversight Committee would like to have. And that way you guys can compare it yourselves. But I think you answered the Senate Oversight Committee issues.
Yeah, I mean.
But if everybody.
We don't need to say any more than we have to say.
That's
because
exactly.
We don't need to lock ourselves in. But it is fast approaching that 6-month mark when you have to report back to the House.
It would be in March.
Yeah. And so if you can, the more things you can go up there and say, okay, this is done, this is fixed,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know, did this, did that. It just is better than, you know, continuing to punt it. But I guess if you...
Well, I just want everybody, when you're talking about governance, I want everybody to be comfortable with what you're doing. And if there is any level of question, I'd be more than happy to do the research and get it all done.
Yeah, I don't think I'm uncomfortable with what we're doing. I just wanted to get a little background in history, and just understand the import of what we're doing. I've got two other little typos that I'd like to just mention before, if we're getting ready to adopt.
Okay.
And also, I wonder if we ought to, at some place we're called commissioners, and at some places we're called commission members. And so I wonder if we ought to just choose one or the other and standardize.
Yep.
The third paragraph to the end, where it says individual commission members' right to speak, that should have a apostrophe after members or after commissioners if we change it to that. And then there just needs to be a semicolon before the word however in the middle of that sentence.
Got it. Got it.
But in terms, I mean, I obviously haven't I haven't verified myself that this addresses all of the oversight committee's concerns. But Vicki, if you have, I trust your judgment on that. And I don't have any problems with the language that I see here in yellow.
Well, I think it does, and I don't necessarily think that we're doing anything. We're more to the point we're undoing the limitations that have been. If we're going to have a governance process policy, which we don't have to have that either, but you know, if we're going to have it, then we might as well correct the Senate things. And I think we should untie the hands of future commissioners, because it really is a process. Having a governance model with goals in mind of what that model is, how that model is supposed to serve us, is an ever-changing thing based on the needs at the time. So it just kind of unties the hands of people, I think, in the future who, when I came on the commission, I was told flat out, you have 5 policies, that's all you have input into, this is it. You know, and that's just not exactly how it needs to operate.
Right, well, it can't be. I mean, if, you know, I'm looking at the org chart that came in my binder when I first became a commissioner, and the governor's at the top and the commission is next. And then under that is the executive director and the rest of the staff. And if the commission runs the agency, which is the way it is established in South Carolina law, to the best of my understanding, then we can't be limited in our consideration of subject matter.
Right, right. We have to decide that for ourselves, not be told that coming in. So I think that accomplishes that also, and you know, just I think we're good, and we can always come back and change anything, but there shouldn't be anything controversial about this, because we're not proposing a certain model and boxing ourselves in. We're just saying our model is going to do this and that and the other. That's what our model's going to do. So
okay.
I think okay. Sam, you got anything else?
No, I don't have the House report in front of me, but from my memory and my discussions when we were being interviewed, I think this one checks all the boxes for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so do we have a motion to adopt this? Now, on this one, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, but historically, we send out administrative directives for comment, but we don't send out commissioner policies for comment. Isn't that right?
It's true. Those are your policies. Mm-hmm.
So we could present this next week.
Yep, you sure can.
Okay. Okay, so do we have a motion to adopt the draft of the governance policy?
So move.
Second.
Okay. So all in favor say aye. And
aye.
Aye.
Okay, all 2 of you. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the, we'll make those changes, Lori,
Thanks.
Mary, if you.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Sandra will work on that.
Okay. So the next one is the comments received for cameras in the regional center. So if y'all would grab that handout, there were some comments. So on the second page, the first one is from the staff who are saying the committee may want to get more descriptive and specifically designate where the cameras will be placed. But you know, we do have in there where they can't be placed, that it has to be common areas and not where you would have expectations of privacy. So I think we're probably okay with not being too prescriptive because each facility is different. Let's come back to that. I mean, it says very clearly, cameras may never be used in areas where the individuals have the highest expectation of privacy, such as bathrooms, bedrooms, or areas where residents meet privately with visitors, or make personal phone calls. So it's pretty clear about where you can't have them. And common areas, by definition, are areas that are used with others that live there, where the expectation of privacy is lower. So I think that's as prescriptive as we need to be, unless y'all want to get more specific and put, like, you know, do we want them in halls, and do we want, you know, things like that. So
I mean, I think
I was envisioning a hall as being a common area, so I figured there would be cameras in hallways.
What were you saying, Laura?
Well, I mean, my only comment was I was wondering if staff thought there was a particular reason we needed to be more prescriptive about where they will be. Do we know that?
No, I think it's just general point of discussion, making sure that you all had considered exactly what you wanted to do with it. I mean, I think part of the evaluation, Rufus, I'm looking at you, but as the company comes in and suggests exactly where the best vantage points are for the cameras and how to have good panning and coverage, or whatever the technological terms are. So I think that largely decides it, but the parameter is for common areas, not private areas. And I think that's probably, my recommendation would be that that's enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Can I ask a question? Has a family ever that's guardian in a situation where an individual has their own private, if they had a private bedroom, has there ever been a situation where it's been requested to have a camera in a private bedroom?
Over the years, families have asked about video surveillance, and there's always an issue of rights in bedrooms.
A issue of what?
Rights in bedrooms.
Okay. Even if the individual has a legal guardian.
So let me just respond to that, Deborah. This policy does not allow, according to the CMS rules, which is what we're basing this on, does not allow cameras in bedrooms. So that's the end of it. You know what I'm saying? I'm just
asking that issue because it was raised with me. I didn't raise it, but someone else did. And the question is, not so much in regional centers, but in community settings where, you know, you're paying the room and board. In essence, even in HUD facilities, you know, you're paying the room and board. That is, quote, your apartment. So I'm just asking that question.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and it is definitely debatable, but my feeling is we're just starting out on this whole camera thing, and I don't really think that we need to go blazing the trail on putting it in bedrooms if we don't have any kind of authoritative, you know, whatever.
Right.
So,
and the easiest thing is to go with the common area at this point.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Lori and Sam, we're going to move on, and then we can come back to that if y'all feel like you need more discussion, because it'll come up again in a little. The second comment is that the Human Rights Committee needs to be added to the directive. Let's see, it says, what if the Human Rights Committee doesn't approve installing video cameras anywhere in the facility? Okay, so the Human Rights Committee is the specially constituted committee. It's our definition of the specially constituted. That can't be required in the ICF. So this draft policy basically is sticking with what CMS has said, you can do this if this is in place. So if you do not have, if the Human Rights Committee doesn't approve installing a video camera anywhere in the facility, I think that is trying to solve a non-problem. I mean, I don't see that there in the communities where people have put them in, there haven't been any objections from families and guardians. So, you know, we do have a Human Rights Committee directive, and families and guardians have to give their permission. So, you know, we shouldn't need anything else. In other words, families and guardians have to be given permission in order to, and have to be given notification that this is coming up. So that relates to 2. I think that relates to 2B, that the Human Rights Committee is going to take it up, and you can have your input into it. And all of that is in the Human Rights Committee administrative directive. So if we want to put that anywhere, I think that's where it needs to be, in the Human Rights Committee thing. Well, don't everybody talk at once.
I'm thinking. I need to read for a second before I.
That's the next directive. This one.
Okay.
Anybody who has an objection to anything that's being done has the right to go to the Human Rights Committee and talk about it. No, even in an institutional setting, right?
That's right.
So they can go, and it's up to that committee to weigh the rights of that individual to the outcome of what is being done. For instance, if someone is having cigarettes kind of restricted because of a doctor's order and they will not comply with that, to have that, they get to go and say, like, you know, I want to smoke myself to death and nobody should tell me what to do. And the Human Rights Committee has to weigh that person's rights to smoke themselves to death versus, well, we think that you can't make an informed choice because you really don't understand your health risks, and they will have a recommendation for the executive director at that point. In the institutional settings, I would imagine people have the same right to go to the HRC. You know, I haven't done that much because I'm in that setting, but they have the same right to go to HRC and express their reasons as to why this is infringing upon their rights. So they would have that opportunity, and like Vicki says, that's already written in another policy.
I think what I'm thinking through is, if we as a commission are declaring that cameras must be in these facilities, in these settings, then if somebody wants to object to that, I don't know that it's a Human Rights Commission issue or a committee issue as to that particular individual. Someone needs to come to the commission and object to our policy. I mean, you can't, if we're declaring that they're required, then the Human Rights Committee can't say, yeah, you're right. For you, we're not going to require it because you have an objection to this camera. Either we're requiring them or we're not, unless I'm misunderstanding the role of the Human Rights Committee. But
my feeling on that, Lori, you've got a really good position there, just saying no matter what, we're going to require it. But according to the CMS guidelines, we can't just require it. We have to have certain things in place in order to implement it. You know, we can say it's required, but the family, the legal guardian, the personal representative, and the client that live in that facility have to agree to that camera being there, according to the CMS guidelines. They have to say that we have to have these things in place, like Human Rights Committee review, that we have to not put them in bedrooms, that we have to have, what are some of these other things they've got in place? They've got a list of things here that, like, if you're going to record it, you got to have a policy in place who has access to it, and then how long you keep it, and that kind of thing. So it's really, it's not like we can say we're going to require. I don't think it's like this. I don't think we can just say we're requiring it, period, and that be the end of it, because all these other requirements have to be met in order for us to implement that requirement, if we go by the CMS rule.
Okay.
And I don't know that we have anything else to go by. You know what I'm saying? It's all we have, an authoritative reference.
I would just.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. I was just going to say, in under required safeguards, the section we're looking at, this is directly from that CMS memo. So, I mean, in number 2, affected individual supported must be informed of the approval, and then the written informed consent must be obtained. So that's really a required integral part of the process. So even if the emphasis is on we're going to have these cameras, you're right, that process still has to take place. And if there's an issue, it has to be resolved or mediated, or else you've got kind of a no-go situation.
And the HRC is to upon rights, so that accidentally use somebody's bedroom and that person felt their rights were infringed.
Right.
They have a means to voice their concern.
Right. It's their forum to voice their concern if they think something could be done.
Okay. You have potential legal issues, wouldn't you? If you didn't have these things in place and you didn't go by them.
Yes, I would definitely think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I didn't know this was coming directly from CMS regulation. So if that's what CMS says, then that's the law.
This is why the camera issue is a sticky wicket everywhere, because of these things. And I think that's why there's not many places that have them on a blanket level for everything as mandated that way, from what we're finding. I think that this is, because there really is one person can say, I don't want them in there. And if you can't mitigate that, and I would think, I've been through with HRC many times for issues, and I understand people's points, and then you can usually talk through them. Or we've had people say, well, I don't want to live in that house anymore. I want to live somewhere else. And then that's how we mitigated it. So I think that I think you just do it on a case-by-case basis, and that's what HRC is all about. It's not about moving in there in mass. It is the individual forum to talk about their individual needs.
Right, and that's why it has to be in place. But the thing about it is that, we're trying to solve a non-problem at this point. So Kelly is in there, correct? Yes. Kelly Eifert, was that your comment about the HR thing? It just says HHS community options. I don't know what that is, but I was just trying to say
that administers the waivers that y'all operate. And I think that was my comment.
You all collectively
review
and compile your questions and then submit them in one document, right? So they're probably collectively all of your questions. Okay.
So let's try to put that in our list of policies to review, and put that in the HRC directive, Kelly, because that probably is where it needs to be. Okay. I looked at that policy and read it, but we won't ignore that. We just need to put it in the right place. I think that would be.
Well, it needs to be in this policy too.
HRC.
Yeah, that we will be informing HRC and they will have their input.
Like paragraph 2, you're saying keep that, but make a different reference in the HRC directive. Is that right, Commissioner Thompson?
You can put that directive in there if you want to. I mean, we don't have to put everything everywhere, but You can reference it. It'd be a good idea. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to number 3 because we've got time constraints here. The third comment is important to decide who the facility administrator is to avoid potential privacy problems. So I think that is going to be I think the next 3 comments are all procedures, and there's some things that I don't think need in our policies to get that prescriptive on, and I don't think we need to be passing procedures. I think we need to stick with policies. So a facility administrator and who that is or who that designee can be, I see that more as a procedure. Comment number 4, schedule of training should be decided not by the policy, but by the procedure. And comment 5, also in regard to training, recommending yearly minimum training. I just want us to not, to begin to start to separate implementation of procedures from commission policy. So I really don't think we need to Lori and Sam, I'd like to have your thoughts on that, but is it possible for us to migrate away from, if we're going to look at all these things and all these directives, and from the past, we have needed to and we haven't. So, but I don't know how prescriptive we need to be in the policies. Do y'all want to look at the training schedule? Do you want to look at who the facility administrator designee is? Or can we leave some of this up to staff?
Yeah, I don't feel qualified to weigh in on who the designee should be or what exactly the training schedule should be. But I also want to make sure that then when staff goes about filling in those gaps, we don't criticize them and say, well, you shouldn't have done this without the commission's input.
Right.
So, but I'm fine with what you're saying, Vicki, leaving it more open as a policy matter.
Well, could we add staff procedures will be in place to address A, B, and C, something like that, or A and B, or whatever it is?
I mean, maybe staff can weigh in here and tell us, does there need to be some additional language in there to authorize what you will then prescribe under the policy, or is it good as is?
I think it's good as is.
Could we put a statement in the policy that the local entity, whatever it is, ICF or the residents, must implement local procedures of some sort? In other words, put a general statement in the policy that the procedure part of it should happen at the local level, and there should be a written procedures implementation document or manual of some sort.
Mary?
I'm sorry. I think it's fine as is. And I don't understand why we should have to have annual training for something like this, but it wouldn't be hard to put it into the annual training packet. Yeah, I don't have any problem with the language as it is.
Okay, comment number 6.
Dictation of
the language seems to imply that facilities might not employ the camera, and that's our earlier discussion that same as comment A, we're going to require the safeguards be in place in cameras in there.
Your voice cracked up a little bit on that.
Yeah, Vicki, you broke up a little bit. Want to try that one again?
I know.
The comment number 6 is the same as the comment in 2A, that, you know, everybody is kind of new at this whole camera thing, and I think if we start out by sticking with this CMS thing, we're all in agreement to that, and, you know, because the comment here is that the language is written to imply that facilities might not employ surveillance cameras. And the reason it's written that way is because all those requirements have to be in place, or like Susan said, it's a no-go. So requiring that those things be in place. So comment 7 is kind of similar. It says, am I still breaking up, or can y'all hear me?
We can hear you now.
You're good.
Okay. Comment number 7 is that her comment was, since a beneficiary will not be able to opt out, consent should be replaced with notice. But I think consent is the correct word, because if they don't give consent, we can't put the cameras in.
I think that's really where, that's what CMS is saying, so you're right, it's the correct word.
Okay, so number 9 is, again, what if a participant wants a surveillance camera in their room? Well, they can't have it in their room, because that's not a common area. So if you read the policy, you know, it really does, and we go by that CMS policy, it clears up most of this. Comment 10, employees need to be notified of the surveillance as well, and this was covered above when it said appropriate signage should be in place. I mean, I'm assuming the employees can read the sign. So number 11, Commission changed it to 60 days, preserving the tape for 60 days until after the final disposition of any review or legal action. Again, I think that's covered. This is comment number 12. Kathleen Morthen, it would be the preference of P&A that video records be kept longer than 30 days if the cost is feasible in case of an allegation of abuse and neglect that is delayed beyond that time period. Well, it says 60 days after the final disposition of any review or legal action. There would be a review, would there not, in the case of an A&E?
Yeah, immediately, and an injury. So even if someone was hurt, you'd start reviewing the cameras too. So
right, but until the policy is saying until final disposition, it's going to be reserved for 60 days.
Right, I think we're going to be keeping it for 60 days before it's like used again. Overwrite, is that what it's called? An overwrite. And then if there's something that goes on and we pull that segment of tape, it's kept until the final disposition is complete. It could go well beyond 60 days. But we're not going to keep all of it because it's so much. You just keep the incident.
The policy says preserved until 60 days after the final disposition of any review or legal action. The question is, do we need to add anything more than that? I mean, I think that's clear. Is that not clear?
To me, it says that you're keeping it 60 days past when everything's resolved. So if you had to go to court, if there's a lawsuit, then it's kept 60 days after that. But by that time, whoever's doing the subpoena for all this stuff, they've got it.
They've got copies.
Yeah. You know, I mean, if this is a lawsuit or this is a legal action where someone is going to be tried, the prosecutor would have that tape or whatever it is, would have that section, and so would the attorney for the plaintiff if it was a lawsuit, or we would. So it's not out there in the hands of people who need it. So, and we're just going to keep it for 60 days past when it's all done.
Okay, but her point was, this kind of delay could occur because of intimidation, fear, or confusion on the part of the victim that prevents the individual from reporting an incident within 30 days. But it's 60 anyway because we changed it.
Right. Yes, ma'am. And
Okay,
that's not final disposition. That's just reporting abuse for an incident. So that's really the first part on page, that would be covered under 3, that you're keeping them for 60 days. That gives somebody 60 days to report it versus the 30.
Okay.
And the
also,
industry standard is 30.
Okay, comment 13 is related to that, and it says that legal action can often take years to commence, and we would suggest clarification as to whether records affiliated with injury will be kept for the full length of a relevant statute of limitations on any related claim. And we've got in there A&E or injury. So again, I think we've covered that like it is.
Yeah, I think her question there is the statute of limitations period as opposed to 60 days after final disposition, because final disposition can only occur if a legal action has been commenced. And I think her point is it should be preserved for the entire statute of limitations period, regardless of whether the legal action has been commenced. I think the problem, as I'm thinking through it, is that if no action has been commenced, then you don't know what piece of video you're being asked to preserve, unless I'm not thinking through it correctly. But you'd have to preserve everything for an entire statute of limitations period.
Well, anything affiliated with an injury or an A&E allegation.
So, is
But
Ms.
then in
Orton
that
in the
case, we
room?
wouldn't know it. We would be keeping that one anyway. Yeah.
I think it's just the idea that if 6 months later somebody makes an allegation about something that happened prior to, you would have the video to consult. I think that's.
But in that case, we'd have to keep everything
Right.
recorded forever,
Right.
for at least 7, or I don't even know what the statute of limitations is. Probably varying on different things, I would imagine. Entry.
If an event is known within the 60 days, we extract it, and we can hold it for as long as we want to until that case is
Resolved.
And I think that's what 13 speaks to.
Yeah, I think we got it covered.
Well, we can start with what we have, and I think we're going to be learning over the next couple of years. We can always come back in, or whoever can, and tweak it, but I don't know how you would save. What would be if you had an injury or an A&E, would you be talking about a lot of money to store a lot of stuff for an undetermined amount of time?
If we have an event within that 60 days, we can take that footage, for that event and burn it to a CD, and we can keep it in perpetuity.
That's not the problem. The problem was what I'm hearing here is that it's for the person who
Wait 6 months.
waits a year or 2 years to report an incident, and we wouldn't even have had that because we didn't know it happened. We're going to keep the ones that if there's an injury or if there's an A&E, that's the stuff we keep. But kind of what I'm seeing implied here is that if someone just decides, I don't know what the statute of limitations are, 5 years later, that they were abused back in whenever, to do that, you'd have to keep all of it. I mean, it'd be impossible.
Yeah, that's not going to be feasible.
That's not feasible.
No.
Okay. I can understand if we have an injury or we have an
It takes
A&E.
a while to process that too. To process that they've been abused and neglected.
Right.
So it does, there's got to be some time.
We have 60 days. But industry standard for keeping just general all-around taping of the whole building 24 hours a day is 30 days. And so we've extended that to 60 days so that someone can process that. But at some point, you've got to have a reasonable amount of time where you can't, there's just no way we're going to be able to keep everything. But if there's an injury, like something happened to somebody, that's what you're going to capture. So,
so we have, we don't really have the best way of
30 days.
We don't have a way of measuring how long we keep anything out in the policy. So let's just move on from that. Number 14 is, okay, who can release the report to whom? So, it just says the state director approves it, but it is not clearly stated who from the facility actually releases it. Again, that's going to be a procedure requirement that the staff need to work out. Who from the facility releases what? I mean, that we've said staff reviewers of the video recordings will not take any recordings or images off campus. But the next comment is a good comment that says may not be transmitted electronically in any form. I think that's a good add-on right there.
And there's that supports that. Yeah. So we're just skipping over that. Cool.
What that was it Midlands or
You
what?
don't want everything, you don't want everything on Facebook. And that's what she's saying there.
Yeah.
Can I just,
Yeah, I think-
can I just say something
was
real
a-
quick? I feel like we're skipping over the issue here with going from, trying to protect people from abuse and neglect. We're just going to put cameras in their homes. I feel like we're skipping over the real issue and just putting a Band-Aid over it. Like, why aren't we providing supports and training to staff members working with people versus just putting surveillance? There's no evidence that suggests that surveillance protects the rights of people with disabilities.
There is training, ongoing training.
Who is that talking? Who just said that?
This is Kimberly Tiso.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yep, and Steve
I'm
Ritter.
sorry. Where are you from again?
The voice.
Oh, where's that from?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm from Able, South Carolina.
Okay, got it. Okay, so let's skip on. Number 15, I think we need to add images may not be transmitted electronically in any form. Because if you can't take them off campus, then you don't need to be emailing them. So does anybody have a
Agreed.
problem with that?
No, I agree with that.
Okay.
In fact, a couple years ago, there was a staff member, I can't remember if it was at Witten or Midlands, that actually was doing that. So, and charges were brought against it.
Yeah. Okay, so any other comments from Lori and Sam?
No, ma'am.
Don't think so.
Okay, do I hear
Not
a
me.
motion that approve the policy as discussed on each? What am I trying to say? A motion to approve the draft policy.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Susan, if you will get that ready for the commission, that would be great.
Certainly.
Okay, and so the last thing is discussion of cameras in community settings. And Mary called me and told me that she had done some research, and by and large, there are no requirements of cameras in communities. So we don't have to vote from the commission yet on requiring cameras in the community. So we're getting this regional center one down. We're having requirements that are going to have to be in place according to CMS guidelines. But we have to decide, do we want to require cameras in the communities? And in order to make that decision, I have compiled a list of questions that hopefully Lori and Sam, y'all have been given or sent.
Yep.
Okay. And I was thinking that we could go two different directions here. We can ask the commission just for a straw poll vote at the next commission meeting to say, do we want to require cameras in the community settings? Or we can kind of gather some more information about it so that we'll have more structure when we actually compose the policy. Like, where are most of the A&Es? Are they on vans? Are they in CTHs? Would we want to restrict camera requirements to nonverbal people? I think that's where our big concern is, because if somebody can tell you that may not be where you want to put them. You may not want to put them in supported living, which is a more independent living situation. just y'all's thoughts on cameras in community settings, Lori and Sam.
Okay.
To gather some more information, or are we, what do you think?
What does community
I would like
settings mean?
more information. Yeah.
I'm sorry. What? I have what is entailed in community settings?
Non-regional center, non-institutional settings, any kind of provider programs, which would include a lot of day programs, would include community training homes, ICFs in the community, apartment living, early intervention. What am I missing, Mary and Susan?
That's that's it. But they're not DDSN owned and operated. They're providers.
CRCF.
Oh, CRCFs.
Yeah, I got CRCF, CTH1, CTH.
All the community homes, and also we have CTH1 homes that are private homes of people that are kind of fostered. Yeah, there's a lot of issues here. And to say that we want to put them in places where just nonverbal people, well, we don't separate people on verbal and nonverbal abilities. That's not one of the criteria where you go to live. So we've got a lot of questions to ask, and we just sent out a question across the country as to who's requiring cameras in like regional state-run ICFs is basically what it is, and who's requiring in non-state run, not non-state operated programs, so they don't own the program. And we're just getting some of the information back. From what we're seeing, we haven't found one state that is requiring them in their provider homes. There's a lot of more issues there because of the way care and maintenance is figured, because of the way they rent they have a lease for their homes. So I think that there's a lot to consider, and I would, from a professional point of view, and frankly as a family member point of view, I would say that we really need to thoroughly think about this before we move in that direction.
Thank you. I would agree with that, and my question was going to be, what are other states doing on this front? So I'll be curious to see what you get back from that survey. Thank you for reaching out.
My question here to the group is, I see these list of questions. Would you like us to have this ready for the commission meeting or just the next policy committee meeting?
Policy.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't possibly have this.
I don't think you can get all this done by then. Okay.
No. Well, it's just we need to have a lot of conversation about it before I think we can get to the commission level.
And I think that you would have a lot of public comments on it too. I see HHS is just shaking their head yes over there.
Can I ask, Mary, since you were doing the surveying, do all other states have state-run ICFs?
Not everybody, but a good chunk do. And not everybody requires cameras. I had a long talk with the fellow from New Jersey, and they don't require cameras. They're working on some policies towards going there, but their state legislators have put some things in legislation as to the safety of the individuals who would fall under our care. So I could get that information for you too.
I'm really curious. I mean, this is taking a step back from the cameras, but as I travel, and it may just be that I'm not interfacing with these state-run facilities, but it seems to me that the state-run ICFs are going by the wayside. That most
they are, but there's quite a few states that still have them, but they're not. They don't call them. What I'm seeing is the nomenclature's changing. They're not calling them like regional centers or institutions. They're calling them ICFs. And I don't even know. I mean, I didn't go visit them. I know California's got quite a few of them, and they are definitely centers. They've got, I think, 5.
They're phasing them out rapidly.
Yeah, they had to since they lost their certification on a few of them. But I think, they're trying to depop. But I think that they're still out there. They're still out there. But I
Okay.
will get all that information to you. Be happy to.
I mean, I don't want to put an additional burden on your plate, but if you're kind of, looking at
No,
that
I think it's
anyway.
good information to know what everybody else is doing. But that's another, phasing out our institutional settings is another issue to deal with families and folks that live there, and it's not something easy to solve.
We're going to have a lot of deliberation about it, but in places where there are a lot of nonverbal people, and when we have an ever-increasing A&E rate, it does we need to be considering it. The other thing that we need to remember is, let me finish this, the other thing that we need to remember is that you have providers who are way ahead of us, and they are already using cameras in their facilities in the communities. And because of that, we don't have any requirements, and we're not asking them to have any requirements. So we've got to move on. At least, if you have them, protect yourself, and and have your policies in place, and don't do it anywhere but the common areas, and don't do it.
I think that would be the more prudent role to take, is to not make it a requirement, but to say these are the things that are required if you do choose to have cameras in your facilities, because I just don't know if we should be mandating that. And we can. I mean, that's something you can open up to public comment before you even have a policy on it. I don't understand why we can't just do hearings on the idea of mandating versus making it, if you so choose, and helping them with, because that was my concern, that if you have a provider that has cameras, that do they have the right policies in place to protect the rights of the individuals living in those facilities? And I'm afraid that some may not. So I don't want them to get in hot water with that.
What I would suggest we do in that situation, Mary, is, like we discussed, go ahead and put those in the indicators. Go ahead and put those in the standards, and put more and more in the standards and less in the administrative directives, because that is just how it needs to be. Mm-hmm. But the providers who are out there doing it, there needs to be some expectations that they meet basic privacy rules. But the concern that I have is that it's changed a lot. The situation has changed a lot since I was a provider, and if we are in agreement that we need them in the regional centers to the point that we're going to require them, then we have a lot of the same people out there in the community, and their needs don't change on the drive from Witten Center to Oconee. So you still have the same nonverbal people. You have still the same vulnerable population wherever they live, and there is a burden on us to do everything that we can to protect. And I know that several years ago, cop cams weren't that popular, and there was a lot of objection to that. And now everybody I wouldn't go anywhere without my cop cam on, as far as I'm talking about a real police officer situation there. But there was some objection to it at first. And so I just want everybody to keep that in mind. We're saying, yeah, let's do it here. No, let's not require it there. And so we're going to go with the rest of the country, baby steps, to get this done. But if it protects one person, if one staff member does not raise their hand to a client in that CTH because they know that camera's there, then we've done a good job by putting that camera there. And no, it's not going to prevent everything. It's not going to prevent a lot of things. But if it deters, then it's certainly
no evidence that cameras protect people from abuse and neglect. There's zero evidence.
No, but the one
training and support.
The one thing it does do, what cameras do, is that it does capture what's happened. And the problem that we have with nonverbal individuals is when something happens, even if they're able to say anything, people discredit them. And therefore, when law enforcement is involved, it is the staff member's word against the individual, just like there's staff members that are hurt too, that they're hurt, and then it's their word, and the individual may or may not be able to. But if there's a nonverbal individual and there's reoccurring abuse that's going on, it seems to me that one of the things.
Why do we have staff members who are doing abuse and neglect?
I agree. Why do we do? But we do, just like there were 2 staff members recently that were in mentor homes here in Columbia that were arrested for abuse. And then there was one right at Midland Center. I mean, I'm talking about within the last couple months. Why do we have these people working?
It can still occur with cameras.
It can occur, but the difference is if you capture the accident, then you're able to get
obviously, this subject is going to have a lot of debate.
A lot of debate.
But the fact is, the ICF is an institution. When you move into the CTHs and the other homes, that is a completely different setting. So the rules for that change also. And that's just one thing we'll have to take into account. But, you know, cameras can.
There's going to be a lot of debate and discussion and disagreement, and you know, people are passionate about it, usually one way or the other. But today, what we're going to do is start gathering information, and that's what we'll report back to the commission next week that we're going to do. Lori and Sam, do y'all have anything else on that?
Nope. Good discussion, though.
I don't.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, thank you so much.
Y'all have a wonderful